You're listening to a podcast from the BBC World Service. This is Hard Talk with me, Stephen Sacker. Thanks for downloading this edition of the programme. I do hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Hard Talk on the BBC World Service with me, Stephen Sacker. My guest today is a seasoned political operator who rose to prominence as the chairman of the Republican National Committee in Washington, D.C. some 8 years ago. Michael Steele was that relative rarity, a black politician at the forefront of Republican politics. He was and is a mainstream Republican in a party that has in recent times been rocked to its roots by the rise of a populist nationalist movement which found a champion in the form of Donald J. Trump. Mr. Trump's extraordinary presidential election victory has presented the Republican Party with opportunity and danger in equal measure. The party now controls the White House and the Congress, but the president's agenda, his style, and his tone are proving to be deeply polarizing. So, is Mr. Trump going to reinvigorate or ruin the party of Lincoln and Ronald Reagan? Well, Michael Steele joins me now. Welcome to Hard Talk.
It's good to be here, yeah.
It's great to have you here. I want to take you back to that day in November 2016 when it became clear Donald Trump was going to be the next president of the United States. For you, as a long and loyal Republican, how did you feel?
I knew what kind of campaign, obviously, he had run over the past year and a half, and had predicted his eventual win earlier on.
But if I may say so, not in neutral fashion. This is a quote from you after you observed one of the later presidential debates. You said of Trump's performance, "I was damn near puking during the debate."
Yeah, exactly. That's how I reacted, how a lot of people reacted, but it had nothing to do with his ability to connect with voters in a way that they would then, several months later, go into the ballot box and pull the lever for him. That's the one thing I think a lot of the political elites and the establishments in the media and elsewhere did not understand fully at the time, was that as much as we were hair on fire about a lot of things that Donald Trump was saying and the tweets and all this other stuff, beneath the surface, he was connecting with people in a way in which they found themselves drawn to him. I stepped back and observed that, and what I realized was Donald Trump's voters were once his audience. So these were people that he had been able to cultivate and develop a relationship with over a long period of time before he ran for president.
And it should be said that you ran the Republican Party National Committee at a time when Mitt Romney was becoming the
Mitt
front
Romney
runner
and John
to be...
McCain. I
Exactly.
took over right after John McCain. Right.
2008 election, 2012 election, where the Republicans simply couldn't find a viable winner.
Well,
and Donald Trump...
I disagree with the concept that they weren't viable winners. They were certainly viable in the sense that they ran competitive campaigns. But the problem was that last little bit, as you know, in politics, is about connection. You can have the best papers in the world. Hillary Clinton's a great example of it. Policy up the yazoo. But at the end of the day, it's that connection with the voters that has to be genuine enough to pull you through. And that was something that was missing at the end of both of those campaigns.
Which brings us to the present day. If you are saying to me that despite your reservations, which you had from the very beginning of the Trump phenomenon, despite your reservations, you could see that this guy had a special ability to connect.
Right.
Let us bring it to the present and ask, what on earth do you think Donald Trump thinks he is doing with the messages he is putting out day by day right now? And let us start with the first and central quote of this period,
right.
And that is his remark to a bipartisan group of Congress people that he couldn't understand why, and it's an offensive word, but he couldn't understand why so many people from shithole countries
right.
were being allowed to come into the United States. Where's the connection there?
Well,
who's he connecting with?
He's connecting to that 37% of his base that has stayed with him throughout, period. That's it, full stop. That's his cornerstone for anything he's going to do. Look, he can calculate and go, I'm going into 2018 with 38%. Democrats have put no one up against me so far who can keep me there. And he believes, and I do believe this, and it's probably a sad commentary in the main, is, if an election is held today, given the options that voters have, he would be in a better position to win than not. And that, again, speaks to the fact that Donald Trump, for everything else that people don't like about him, with that core constituency that has stayed with him, that's a good, solid base to start from. And so he appeals to them. Those comments appeal to those voters. He appeals to that baser instinct.
You are that relative rarity in the Republican Party, a senior voice from the black American community. In your view, is Donald Trump a racist?
Yeah, I think he has racist tendency. I think he uses race as a weapon to divide and conquer his opponents, to shift the narrative to something else.
Personally, how do you feel about that?
It's bothersome. I mean, what do you...
Bothersome? I mean,
okay,
it doesn't matter. Black American.
What am I going to do about it? Doesn't matter. I didn't vote for the man. So what does it mean?
Hang on, you didn't vote for Trump?
No, I didn't vote. No. I didn't. That's not a
former chief of the RNC who refused to vote for the Republican candidate.
That's been on the record since the election. No, since before the election, because I could not. I mean, look, I have a certain value set. I have a certain principles, and I have a certain way I look at the kind of leaders that I want to represent me. And the key thing to understand here, and I think this is a critical moment on the heels of this recent controversy with the president, that this is no longer about Donald Trump. I mean, we need to get over this shock and awe with Donald Trump. Oh, guess what he said today? Oh, my God, what does this mean? It doesn't mean anything. He is who he is. He's a 71-year-old man that was born out of a certain period of time.
But
he reflects that period of time.
We normalize the fact that, in your view, a racist is sitting in the White House.
We had an election. There's no impeachment proceedings. There's no 25th Amendment proceedings. This will resolve itself at the ballot box in 2020. The American people will have a decision to make at that time. So whether Michael Steele feels a certain way or anyone else feels a certain way, the only thing you can do at this point is talk about it. And here's the key thing. This is less about Donald Trump and more about the American people, a reflection of us. And the question becomes, is this the reflection that we want to continue to project?
Well, we'll go to the American people and what it says about the nation after we talk more about the Republican Party.
Sure.
Because, again, let us constantly remind ourselves, you speak to me as a former chief of the Republican National Committee. What do you make of the responses to this particular outrage, the use of the word, again, it's offensive, but I'll use it, shitholes, but other things we could talk about with Donald Trump and race.
Totally inappropriate.
What do you think of but what I want to know is what you make of the reaction of the leadership of the Republican Party
disappointing.
On Capitol Hill.
The reaction of Republican leaders is disappointing beyond any measure. You won't see any real movement against Donald Trump inside the GOP until his numbers change inside the GOP. Because you have to keep in mind that members of Congress, in a particular way, they look at their congressional districts. Donald Trump is at 60+% in their congressional districts. They're not going to go against that number. They don't want to be primaried in a primary election. They don't want to be in a situation where the president is using the hammer of his office as we've seen him do in other races.
Forgive me if I sound as though my mind is being boggled here, but you're saying the top echelon of the Republican Party is happy to yoke itself to a racist as long as they believe that is in their political self-interest.
Why are you sitting here shocked by this? Didn't you watch the 2016 election? You saw 15 other people stand on the stage and couldn't put a glove on the man. You watched party leaders admit, yes, what he just said was racist, but we can still work with him. So what you have to get over your shock and step back and understand the politics that's beneath the surface. It's no stranger here. We've seen this in your own country, in Great Britain, when you look at the shock and all the next day after Brexit. But let me finish the point. You have to understand where people are coming from. And you have to understand what motivates and moves the political leadership that represents those people. And at the end of the day, politics is at the core of it.
Even on that cynical premise,
It's not cynical, it's fact.
Well, but it may be factual, but you could also argue in the world of values and morality, it's cynical too.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So even in the basis you've presented the argument, I still don't understand why the Republican Party is in lockstep still with Donald Trump. Because if one looks at basic facts about demography in the United States...
What are they going to do at this point? What do you think is going to happen at this point? What would you recommend happen at this point? The titular head of your party...
meaningful distance between themselves
and Donald
Trump.
How can they do that?
Well, they can start by saying, Mr. President, the way you are dealing with these issues, like immigration, is utterly unacceptable
to us.
And then what?
So when he goes, so what do you do then? Because he's the one who's got to sign whatever legislation you pass. And so if he doesn't sign the legislation that you want to get passed, what have you accomplished?
But just
so
going
you've
back
got
to
to
hang on, just stop for a second. Just going back to your notion of what's in their electoral self-interest,
right.
You have the fastest growing demographic in the United States today being the Latino Hispanic community.
Correct.
They, by and large, look at a president who, on issues like building the wall...
They voted 30% for him in 2016.
You think right now
they voted
the Hispanic community is still 30% with Trump?
I don't know. I haven't seen the polling, but I'm just saying, given everything that had gone before, certainly with respect to Hispanics and the DACA issue, that's an important issue on the back end, on the policy side. But I'm just saying, it doesn't follow any particular logical pattern. That's the thing that's so frustrating about this, because the voters themselves, that's why I go back to this being Donald Trump. I give speeches around the country all the time and say, everyone's upset about Donald Trump. He's a reflection of us. He's a reflection of where we are in our politics right now.
You say what could we do as politicians or political commentators such as yourself these days? One thing you could do, if I'm going to make it personal, is you could quit the Republican Party until Donald Trump
Why would I do that? Why would I? This is
because your party is backing a man who you believe to be a racist.
I can leave and quit and do what? Become like everybody else who leaves, or I can stay inside and fight for my party. I believe in the founding principles that drew me to the party in the first place.
There's no fight. You've given up. You say there's nothing we can do.
I didn't say. I'm talking about you're talking about what are legislators going to do. They're not going to impeach the man. That's not going to happen. So get that out of your head. It's not happening. They're not going to invoke the 25th Amendment where the cabinet and the vice president write a letter saying the president's incompetent to serve. That's not going to happen. So the question becomes now, how do you get through and get substantive policy done, all right, if you can, and how do you, to your point, and look, I don't want to give the impression that I don't appreciate what you're saying. I do. The question is, there's only so much of this that's going to get itself worked out now. That's what elections do. This November will be the first time the American people will be able to send a signal, as we saw in 2006 that they did with George Bush, where they had enough with the war, they had enough with the economy. They took the House away from Republicans. They unelected a lot of folks. And I think that's the trend line I see happening going into this fall.
Well, look at the local races we saw recently in the state of Virginia. Look at what happened to Roy Moore in Alabama. It looks to me as though in a whole host of significant races in 2018, if the Republican Party continues to tie itself to Donald Trump, they may well be facing a disaster.
And they very well may be. And you know what? You got to learn from the school of hard knocks, because that's what politics is all about. If you want to go down this road, you want to continue down this road, you do not want to, and I agree with the advice you just gave. I've given this advice. I've given it to folks inside the White House.
So at what point, again, it's personal. Well, at what point, when the party will not listen to people like you, and it's relevant here that you're African American. The Republican Party is not noted right now for its sensitivity.
It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that. It's not about, oh, I'm a black man, therefore he said this, I got to step away. I became a Republican because of men like Frederick Douglass, because of men like Martin Luther King and others, and certainly Abraham Lincoln, the founder of the party. I became a Republican because of men like Ronald Reagan, who inspired in me not just a sense of service, but a sense of responsibility to my community and what we can do to help the least of these.
Is it time for more and more Republicans who are minded like you and who are frankly disgusted by what they're seeing from Donald Trump in the White House to actually say they want no part of electoral politics right now? I'm thinking of Senator Jeff Flake, for example, who is outspoken in his criticism of Donald Trump, said recently there are times when we must risk our careers in favor of our principles, and now is such a time. And he, realizing that because of his criticism he was not going to get the Republican nomination to refight in his seat in Arizona, he's walked away.
And
he's quit.
I think that's unfortunate. And I've said so. I've told him that. I think what he should, even though if what you're saying, and he wrote a great book on this, and if you really believe these founding principles hold true, then you stay in the fight. What good is it to walk away and to lessen the authority of your voice? Even though even though you may lose your primary.
That's called making a principled stand.
No, it's not. In my view, it's not.
Here's another thing he said. When the next generation, says Senator Flake, asks us, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you speak up? What are we going to say?
Well, speaking up is one thing. Walking away is something different. And my attitude is you are a current sitting United States Senator who's drawn a very bright line with this president, as has Senator Corker in Tennessee. Drawn a very, very bright line with this president. So you're looking at your reelection prospects and they don't look good. What do? What I do is I stay in the fight. I stay in the fight to make the point because I've got the authority of my office. I've got the fire of my positions to stand in that and go, you know what, I'm going to use my reelection. I'm going to use my primary as the battleground for what I believe in. And I may go down in flames, but I'm going to make the principal point that this should not stand. And who knows? Who knows? You just may win.
Are we not seeing and I'm going to create a phrase here, the Steve Bannonization of the Republican Party? Bannon's point is that he is an insurgent. He is a nationalist populist, and he believes his movement is bigger than Donald Trump, and that whatever happens to his relationship with Trump, it is the Bannon politics of insurgency that will ultimately drive the Republican Party.
Well, clearly there's not a whole lot of life in that because he didn't.
Why do you say that?
Because he did. Did he elect Roy Moore? Is Roy Moore going to the United States Senate? No, he's not.
No, but let's see how many Bannon acolytes are in the race.
Bannon acolytes are dropping out of the race. They're second guessing their runs because they've watched this thing collapse around them. Look, you have to understand the truth of the matter is Bannon has no base. His base is Donald Trump's base, and Donald Trump's base is with Donald Trump, not with Steve Bannon. So these candidates that they're putting up and promoting out there looked at what happened in Alabama. And they went, I don't think so. So they're already beginning to back out of the idea of running. You're not going to see a situation where Steve Bannon is going to be promoting candidates on one side and Donald Trump's going to be promoting candidates on the other. That's a mismatch that won't even stand the test at all because Bannon has no base. What Bannon has, though, is a populist idea that has taken hold, that Trump has used to some degree. But even there, Donald Trump has sort of created this own space for himself.
Let me ask you a broader question about race in America today, and it's something I've seen discussed in recent hours in the United States quite a lot. The idea is that if the Democratic Party for the next presidential election comes out with an out-and-out left-wing candidate, maybe a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, and they are running against Donald Trump, there are people in this country who believe that whatever misgivings people have about the perception Donald Trump is racist, they would rather vote for a racist than for somebody who they believe with their left-wing policies might affect their economic position and their pocketbook. Is that something that you believe?
I think that's something that's a fair. I think that's a fair assessment. America is not a progressive left country. At its core, we're very puritanical in many respects.
But is white America instinctively, in your view, dangerously racist?
No, that's a silly comment to make. That's crazy.
Well, it's a question. It's not a comment. But given everything we've discussed in the last 20 minutes.
So I'm going to project that all white people are racist like Donald Trump? No, that's silly. That's just absolutely silly. Next question.
But you do not seem to be depressed that roughly a third of the American people are still diehard supporters of a man who you describe as a racist.
I don't get depressed because I got my bottle of gin. I get through the day, So no, I'm having fun with it. No, I think that where you're going with that is just part of a stereotyped view of America that is, you just need to get over it.
Before we end, just a couple of quick-fire questions about news events of recent days. One that we've discussed already, alluded to the publication of Fire and Fury by Michael Wolff. Now, fact checkers have had a field day because not everything in that book is accurate, but nonetheless, the picture it paints of the Trump White House and the views of people around Trump that this man is not a suitable President of the United States, not competent to do the job. Does that worry you?
Oh, it does. It worries a lot of people and that's why it was so important coming in. And I did a little bit of work on the transition before the president's team blew it up. was so important to get the right people in the White House, to get the right people in place to help support. Look, we understood, if nothing else, that you had an individual coming in to the Oval Office who had no political established order. He had no political team. He had no real political base in Washington with which to work, no relationships on Capitol Hill, no relationships on K Street, which is the sort of the financial fundraising part of politics. And so the idea was to give him a team of people and put in place a team of people, which is why, the positions of Secretary of State and Department of Defense and CIA were so important in these critical areas, to have good, competent people there who the president would listen to. The problem, as we've discovered, is that the president does not listen well. And the president, in his own way, is his own man, and I get that. But when you don't have the strength of a political structure to help you navigate the Washington and the responsibilities of the office, this is what you get.
And we have to end in a moment. I'm amazed by your cheerful demeanor throughout this interview. As a senior figure in the Republican Party, the party of Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan, do you not feel that right now your party is on a one-way path to self-destruction?
Look, I think my party has not had to deal with a lot of things that we need to deal with since Reagan left office, to be honest. This is not just Donald Trump. The issues that are roiling inside the GOP have been there since really the late 80s, early 90s. This idea of who we are as Republicans, Republican versus conservative. Are they the same? Are they different? This idea of what we believe, what we stand for. We've watched this party, to my great frustration, again, prompted by this administration, move closer towards, a blind loyalty to Putin and Russia. What the hell is that? I mean, where'd that come from? We were the party that labeled them the evil empire.
Doesn't it come back to cynicism? It comes back to the fact that Donald Trump has delivered massive tax cuts for the wealthy and for corporate America. Mm-hmm. He has delivered the destruction of affordable health care. But all that was in place before those things happened.
So what you're talking about is post-administration. He's already been elected, and they moved those balls down the train. But that conversation about Russia in particular, that was transformative before. That was something that took place. They changed the party platform under Trump's team to sort of embrace a little bit more of this idea of Putin and Russia. So what I'm saying is it's not just tax cuts for the rich. This is an ideological shift for the party that has nothing to do with tax cuts.
But you didn't actually address my question. If this continues, is the party facing self-destruction?
No, I don't think so. I think the party, like any other organization, is going to go, yes, there's going to be rips and tears, and we'll wait to see what emerges out of it. That's why I stay in. This is why the fight is important to me. I'm not giving up my space. I'm not walking away from the station I have. I think these ideals and these values still matter, and I think they're worth fighting for.
And we have to end there. But Michael Steele, thank you for being on HARDtalk.
No, my pleasure.
That was an edition of HARDtalk presented by me, Stephen Sacker. For details of our complete range of podcasts and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts.